Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we continue with our discussion on the existence of seven earth, or what Al-Quran mentions about seven earth, and we have covered in the previous lectures on the the Quranic sources and the Hadith sources of seven earth, how the seven earth came into being, why is it being discussed, at least in my book, because there are Quranic verse in the there is a Quranic verse in the Quran. How do I say? There is a verse in the Quran that talks about the existence of seven earth, or indicating there are seven earth, and then there is also a hadith that mentions about seven earth, and we have also covered on the what's so-called interpretation by past scholars on the seven earth. What does it mean actually, the seven earth? How all the seven earth are being structured, right? Whether it is horizontally across the vast ocean, or stacked vertically one on top of the other. So there are interpretations, and all these interpretations based on sources that highly likely does not come from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We've discussed that because the content of the hadith is problematic, and also the chain of narration is also problematic. So we can actually safely discount the validity and the authenticity of that hadith. So once we remove that, we have to go back to square one. What does it mean by seven earth? And this is where scholars, modern scholars, actually contemporary scholars, try to give their own interpretation based on the knowledge that Allah has given human beings currently. Okay, and there are a number of scholars or people who are interested in trying to interpret the meaning of seven earth, but I selected only three, which from my research, they are the most prominent, and also they are different from each other. Whereas other opinions, they follow one of these three, opinions of these people, or we call it people with knowledge. Now, the first one is Dr. Zakhlul An-Najjar. Now, Dr. Zakhlur An-Najjar, he is a geologist from Egypt, Egyptian geologist, specialized in of course, geology, and he wrote a number of books on science and Islam. I've read some of them, and some of them I agree, most of them I do not agree, because it seems that Dr. Zakhlul, when he wrote such books, Islam and science, or anything that relates to science, he talked more on science rather than the the Islamic sources. So it is more like a popular science book that is being inserted with some Quranic verses or some hadith. So therefore it does not really amaze me, his books, actually, to be frank with you. And he is I can, if I want to term, I use the term given by other scholars, right? He belongs to the group that they call as apologists, and apologists towards modern science. It means that their approach is try to bend Islam to suit modern science. Modern science say this. So can we find the Quran? Can we find the Hadith? And they try very hard to find any Quranic sources, Quranic verses that they can somehow rather bend in or reinterpret it, or even if it is far-fetched interpretation, they try to take it and try to suit it to what modern science has discovered. So some scholars call them as apologists, right? Try to suit Islam to modern science. And Dr. Zakhlul An-Najjar, some of them say it belongs to this group of apologists. He is a scientist, no doubt about it. Right? And he knows Arabic, he knows Quran. But his philosophy in approaching understanding Al-Quran and Hadith from the perspective of science, his philosophy is, according to other scholars, an apologist approach, or apologist philosophy, trying to suit modern science, intellectual Islam to modern science. Much like, some people, we call them as liberals, they try to suit Islam to modern life, and somehow rather try to reinterpret whatever Quran verses or hadith so that it can, gel with what they want and what they perceive as, modern life, modern approach, or even for this group of people of apology scientists, modern apologist Muslim scientists, to suit with modern science. Now, that is Dr. Zakhrul al-Najjar, but his idea of seven earth is quite, unique. Not just unique, it is an idea that is being followed by a number of other thinkers, people of knowledge, or even scholars, and use his approach to divide the earth into 7 layers. Because Dr. Zarul Najjar, right, if we can say the first, he was among the first who tried to interpret the 7 earth as the 7 layers under the earth. And because he is a geologist, therefore his word carries weight. So therefore he said that the 7 layers or 7 earth refers to 7 layers under us. And then he gave the name. It is the crust, the Mohorovičić discontinuity, the upper mantle, mid mantle, lower mantle, transitory, and stratosphere. Now it is a very technical term, and if you look at the numbers and the names, well, it fits 7, right? Just nice. Unfortunately for him and for those who wants to follow this approach in interpreting 7 earth, there are more than 7 layers of, what do you call it, 7 layers under the earth interior or inside the earth interior. It can be more than 7. Any number of layers you can give it, because it depends on how you interpret those layers. Just look at this picture. I took it from geography4u.com, right? How many layers are there? You can see the first one is continental crust, and then we have the oceanic crust. Let's start with oceanic crust. That is the crust under the ocean. That's number 1. Then we have uppermost mantle, number 2. Number 3, partially molten how do you call this? Asthenosphere. Then solid asthenosphere. Then mantle transition. Already how many are there? 2, 4, 5. And then 6, lower mantle. And then outer molten core. And then inner solid core. There are 8 layers. Now, where in these layers can you find the Mohorovičić discontinuity? You can't. And where is centrosphere in this interpretation or in this description of Earth interior? Where is it transitory? You can only find lower, mid, and upper mantle there. Or outer molten core is not there also. So it depends on how you look inside the Earth interior. Right? How many layers you want to differentiate it? Now, the Mohorovičić discontinuity is the merging of the uppermost mantle with the crust. So we have the continental crust, and the continental crust extend to the oceanic crust, and then in between the crust and uppermost mantle, we have that Mohorovičić discontinuity, where earthquakes sometimes happen. And then you go down lower than that, you have partially molten atmosphere, then solid one, then mantle, then lower mantle, then you have outer molten core. See how you define, and even this is a rough estimate of our Earth interior, because humans, us, now we know more about outer space than what we know inside our own planet. We can't, investigate directly what is inside our planet. We can't, because we can't dig it. It's too deep. It's too deep, and it is too hot. And the pressure is very high. We do not have the, the tools to dig more than 10 kilometers deep. I shared with you last week the deepest hole, right, being dug by those Soviet scientists in 1980s, late 1980s. They reached to the depth of about 10 kilometers, 10 to 11 kilometers, and then they stopped. They could not proceed further. That is the deepest hole ever dug by humans. And they cannot proceed further because it's so hot in there. There are, the diamond bead, drill bit, there are metals that they lower down, right? It becomes all malleable and soft that that you cannot use it to really dig further. It becomes so like plasticine because it's so hot, it melts. So therefore, that's the deepest hole. And yes, just 10 kilometers, and that 10 kilometers is not even halfway of the oceanic crust. Not even halfway. Not talk about continental crust, right? And then you have not reached the uppermost mantle where you have the lava, I mean, moving here and there, and the lava shoots up from uppermost mantle through the crust and then explode to the atmosphere through volcano or whatever cracks on the Earth's surface from, from the tectonic movement of plates. So lava seeps through from there, and the lava comes from uppermost mantle. And sometimes, right, there is, we do not know what happened under us. Sometimes there is some explosion that caused, some carbon to be shot up from maybe from the astrosphere all the way to mantle and all the way to continental crust. And because it is so hot and the pressure is so high, this carbon, as it shoots up, it cools down and becomes diamond. So diamond is actually carbon. The only difference between charcoal and diamond is just the structure of the carbon atom. Diamond, the carbon atom is arranged in tetrahedron type, where it is, it is solidly packed, whereas carbon, you have the carbon atoms being arranged in parallel to each other. That's why carbon is very brittle. Charcoal is very brittle. You can break it apart like that, but diamond is super hard. Nothing can cut diamonds except diamonds, because carbon, when it interlocks with each other, it becomes very strong. So charcoal, you can slice across the layers of molecules, but you can't slide throughout the molecules. So because, the carbon atom, the interlink is very, very strong. So therefore, in charcoals, you cannot, sometimes you can cut this way, but you cannot cut this way. Sometimes you can cut this way, you cannot cut that way. It's going to be super hard. So because of that that interlock. So this carbon being shot up from under us, right, through what you call it as tubes. Allah make this tube. Of course, everything Allah makes. This tube exists in certain parts on Earth planets, surface of the Earth. This tube becomes the conduit for this carbon, right, to go up and solidify and becomes diamonds. So not all places on Earth that has this tube conduits from Earth interior that shoot up right to the top. Right? Only certain places, and those certain places, they tend to concentrate, or they tend to be a lot of these tubes that connect the Earth crust right to the Earth interior. And some of those places, one of those places is in South Africa, and that's why South Africa, right, is famous for producing diamonds. Not producing, but have diamonds inside its land, because because there are a lot of these diamond tubes that emerge from the Earth interior. Why we can't find diamonds in Malaysia or in Singapore? Because there is no that carbon tubes or diamond tubes that shoot up from Earth interior right to the top. So these things happen in certain places. Allah has decreed that. So whatever it is, right, there are a lot more layers under us, and we do not really know what is under us. We only know those layers, or we can guess the existence of those layers. For example, lava, we have the mantle, we have the outer molten core, and then the inner solid core, which is pure iron inside there. And it's very important because it generates what not just it's not gravitational field, it generates magnetic field that protects us from all these dangerous rays from the sun. We only know that from earthquakes. Imagine, we have to wait for earthquakes to happen. Only from that earthquakes, we can actually discover what's inside us. How to discover? When earthquake happens, it generates waves, seismic waves, and it's a very strong waves, and it goes inside the earth and goes up there. So if you put enough seismograph, all these equipments that measure earthquakes, to put it roughly, you can measure the time that the waves need to travel from the point of earthquake right to that monitoring system, that seismograph, what do you call it, machine, if you want to call it that way, right? And then what is the type of waves? right? Is it sinusoidal wave, cosine wave, or what type of wave? What is the frequency, right? What is the wavelength? And from that, right, scientists can, roughly gauge what is inside us. But it is, a developing knowledge. We're still trying to discover more of our Earth interior, and we do not know a lot about our Earth interior. What is inside us? Allah mentions in Surah Taha, ya'lamu ma baina ya'lamu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ardi wa ma bainahuma wa ma tahta thara. Allah knows what is in the heavens and what is in between heavens and earth, and what is on earth and what is inside the earth itself. We do not know what is inside the earth right now. Our knowledge is very scarce and very scant. We can roughly estimate. So therefore, if you want to interpret the seven earth as the seven layers under the earth, that is definitely wrong. First, there are more than 7 layers. Second, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the 7 earth is similar to the 7 heavens. And if you talk about 7 layers, under us is 7 earth, so therefore it is similar to the 7 layers of atmosphere above us. And that is certainly wrong. The 7 heavens is not the 7 layers of atmosphere above us, because number one, there are more layers of atmosphere above us, or lesser than 7. Or how you want to count those layers, it depends on your own, whimsical desire how to differentiate all those layers. That's number one. Number two, right? Clearly in the hadith that after the 7th heaven is the arash of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did his mi'raj and travel all across the 7 heavens, and we have covered this before last year, right? All the 7 heavens, and then at each layer of that heaven, he and the angel Jibril, they were stopped by the angel guarding that layer of heaven. And then came the conversation, who are you? You been given permission to pass through? Yes, I'm given permission. Who is this person? He is Muhammad, and has he been given permission to pass through? Has he been given permission to pass through? And then only then, right, the gates of that heaven being open, and Rasulullah SAW and Angel Jibril pass through and stop again at the next layer, and all the way 7 stops before the Arash of Allah. So if that is 7 layers, that 7 heavens are 7 layers of atmosphere, we are certainly, mashallah, better than the Prophet ﷺ. We went through all the way up, all the 7 layers of atmosphere without any angel stopping us. And in fact, we are beyond that 7 heavens or 7 layers of atmosphere. We have sent probes, right, all the way beyond Pluto. So are we greater than Angel Jibril? Of course not. So therefore, that is a clear evidence that the interpretation of 7 layers of heavens refers to 7 layers of atmosphere. Our atmosphere is certainly wrong. And if that is wrong, then therefore the interpretation of 7 heavens, 7 earth, referring to the 7 layers under us, is also wrong. So I'm just sharing what some modern scholars try to interpret what are those 7 heavens. 7 earth. Now, a second what do you call it, main idea of what 7 earth is this, right? Being proposed by Dr. Daud Salman Al-Sa'di. Now, he is not a scientist, actually. He is a scholar of other fields, but he wrote a book on science and Islam in Arabic language. I have the book. That's why I know about his interpretation. I read the book. And somehow or other, the book won the first prize in Dubai book expo or whatever lah. But his book won the first prize. Somehow like a recognition of the the profound insight that people can find inside the book. Well, it doesn't amaze me. I read the book, right? And I found it, some of those ideas that he proposed is quite normal. Some of it quite wild. Some of it is downright wrong. So for example, right, Dr. Daud Salman Al-Sa'di here, in his book, he proposed that the 7 earth are actually the 7 continents on earth. That is the interpretation, without basing it on any Quranic past interpretations or a hadith. He just took that verse of the Quran in Surah Talaq and he said, okay, 7 earth, so therefore it's 7 continents, because there are actually 7 continents on earth, according to him. Unfortunately, again, right, this is just, pick and choose, cherry picking, whatever things out there to suit his interpretation. They're actually not 7 continents. Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Australia, and Antarctica. All right, if you want to say 7 continents, how you define continents? How you define continents? Is it, an island by itself, just like Australia? Australia is an island, right? Actually, if you want to define island like a land surrounded by sea, if there's an island, so therefore Australia is a huge island. So therefore a big island is called continent. If that is continent, then how you define Africa? Africa is a continent, it's surrounded by sea, yeah, but it's connected to Asia, to Middle East, by that tiny strip of land. We call it as Suez or Sinai Peninsula. And then, of course, humans cut across and make a canal. And so therefore, somehow rather, technically it is, the African continent is detached from the Middle East by that very, very narrow canal, Suez Canal, that recently been blocked by a huge ship. So can you call that canal as sea? Of course you can't. If you cannot call it a sea, so therefore the African continent is connected to the Middle East. So how you define continent in the first place? You can't. So the definition of continent is actually more political rather than geographical, more political than scientific. Asia, they call it as Asian continent. Where does this continent start and when does it end? Or they say the Asian continent ends with European continent. How you define European? Where do you draw the line in between Asia and Europe? Because there's no natural phenomena, natural landscape that breaks these 2 continents apart. Asia is Asia, or all the way you have the what they call it Central Asia, and all the way up you have the borders of so-called Europe. And where does Europe start and where does Europe end? Does Europe start with Poland, or does it start with Turkey, or does it start with some country like Russia, the western part of Russia? So it's all political. People draw lines on Earth maps and say this is continent A, this is continent B, because all this continent A, it encompasses countries that share same similarities, share same political inclination or economic bloc, so they call it as a continent. And all these people over there, they have different features, right? Flattened nose, and then shorter statures, smaller bodies. So you call it Asian continent. So it's political. It is just whimsical way of differentiating humans according to political and according to economical and according to racial profiling. So this is not scientific at all. 7 continents is basically, right, a construct of the European conquerors. When they discover America, South America, say this is South America. So it's a huge continent. So it's a huge land connected to the northern part, very small, Isthmus, a small piece of land, Honduras and whatever small countries over there, right? Mexico and so forth, Panama. And therefore we have 2 continents. But it is connected. People have been moving up, down, all the way across human history. So how can you differentiate into North and South America? Why can't you differentiate between South Africa and North Africa and you call it Europe as North Africa? But you won't. You call it Europe. So something's like, no, I'm European. Because it's Europe-centric. This differentiation of continents is Europe-centric. Okay, so therefore, Dr. Daud here, somehow rather, he fell into that, Europe-centric view of the world, differentiating the world into 7 continents. Now, if you want to be specific on what continent is all about, right? You can just, take that scientific approach of plates, tectonic plates, because Earth crust is not one solid crust, but it's broken up into smaller crust. So all these, like cracks on Earth's surface, right, they join together. And each of these cracks, right, it actually enclose what you call it, the scientific name is called plate, right? It's just like, just like our food plate, something like that, but it's connected. So all these plates, they are not connected to each other, so they slide. They are floating above the magma, right? The Earth interior, so it floats here and there. So everything floats, and things float, things will move. So they move, and when they move, they cause friction among each other. So then the land or whatever boulders or earth that binds them together, right, cause them to stuck, but it's still moving. So the potential energy being built up by that movement, it can't move because it's being locked by that folding mountains or whatever in between these two plates. But somehow it will come a time when the potential energy is so great that we will overcome the energy stored in those mountains or boulders or earth or rocks, whatever, that lock the two plates together. So therefore those locks will break off, and then we have an earthquake. So that is basically how earthquakes happen. Now, scientists so far, they have found out that there are plates under us, and they give the names. So how many plates are there? We have Eurasian, Arabian, African, Indian, Australian, Philippine, Pacific, Cocos, more than 7 already. It's more than 7 plates. And scientists are still discovering more plates, smaller plates, not as huge as African plate, but smaller plates under some other countries or areas. For example, this Juan de Fuca plate here, right, just at this San Francisco Bay Area here. And the Americans call it as the San Andreas Fault. This is the San Andreas Fault. And this is where earthquakes happen. The last great earthquake happened across the San Andreas Fault was about 100 years ago. And it destroyed San Francisco, Los Angeles, and whatever California, Southern California over there. And it's high time for earthquake to happen around this plate here, this area here. But this area here, this San Andreas Fault here, it is actually the meeting point of Juan de Fuca plate with North American plate. It will happen, right? Sooner or later. It's high time for it to happen. And when it happens, right, it is 100 years thought of potential energy waiting to be released. And once it released, you can bet that it's going to be a great energy being released by the earthquake. It can even cause, the Richter scale. This is the scale for earthquake. The Richter scale can approach 8 or 9. It is a huge scale, just to give a sense of idea of how this Richter scale works. If you have an earthquake that happens at Richter scale 7, for example, right? Scale 7 in the Richter scale, the level 7, and then you have another earthquake that is happening at level 7.1, is just 0.1, but actually that 0.1 is equivalent to 10 times the energy being released by the earthquake of Richter scale 7. So 7.1 earthquake is 10 times stronger than 7. So imagine between 7 to 8, it is 100 times stronger. The earthquake that happened in Aceh in 2004 during Boxing Day, 26th of December 2004, Richter scale of that earthquake is around 8. I think 8.2, something like that, right? And that it caused, huge tsunamis, killing 200,000 people, leveling Aceh, like it's never been built by humans before. 8 point something on Richter scale earthquake. But before that, there was another earthquake that really topped it. That earthquake happened along this, what they call it, Alaska Peninsula here. Okay, this string of islands, I forgot its name, right? Yeah, You can look it up on the map, but the earthquake happens here because it happens along the Pacific plate that meets with North American plate here. So it is a sliding earthquake, and it caused a 9.0 Richter scale earthquake, huge earthquake, but it does not cause a lot of damage. Why? Because it happened in rural areas, and people hardly remember that earthquake, but it was a huge earthquake. Just like an earthquake that happens, right, a few years after that between the Nazca plate and the South American plate, it is close to 9 Richter scale along the Chilean coast here, Chilean, western coast. But again, does not cause a lot of damage because it happens in rural areas. So, our perception as humans, right? Some people say, oh no, now there are a lot of earthquakes. Therefore, one of the signs of the end of time will be a lot of earthquakes. So there are a lot of earthquakes. So therefore, we are approaching the end of time. Yes, we are approaching the end of the time, but the number of earthquakes that are happening right now, according to history, is almost constant. It does not vary that much. There is no spike in the frequency of earthquakes, right, happening quite deeply. No, right? The number of earthquakes that happened 100 years ago is almost the same as the number of earthquakes that happen now, 100 years later. Right? So it does not increase dramatically, but we perceive that the number of quakes is a lot. Why? Because earthquakes happen now a lot more often in urban areas. Why a lot more often in urban areas? Because humans have built, humans have expanded. There are more humans on Earth, so humans have more towns and cities along the plates, and so therefore, when earthquake happens, it creates a lot of news, generates so much news. So therefore, it gets into our psyche that there are a lot of earthquakes happens, but actually, no, number of quakes remains almost the same. So again, goes back to here. You can see that there are more than 7 plates. So if you want to interpret the 7 Earth as the 7 plates or 7 tectonics, it's certainly wrong. Why? Because even though we can say 7 continents, but 7 continents, the name of continents or the definition of continent itself is not scientific. It is based on European worldview of how they define this world. They are always at the center, Europe. But if you want to go to the scientific part, which is what there are 7 crusts, but actually there are more than 7 crusts, and it keeps on increasing because scientists keep on discovering new smaller crusts. If there is earthquake in a certain place, then scientists will try to discover, is there a hidden crust that we do not know of that caused this earthquake? For example, look at North American plate, right? In the middle here, middle of America here and the eastern coast of America, you can hardly have any earthquakes because there is the middle of the North American plate. It's not, the intersection, the meeting point of 2 plates. Earthquakes only happens on the intersection of 2 plates. But earthquakes did happen and will always continue to happen in between, not just in between the plates, but in the middle of the plates. So there were earthquakes that happened along the east coast of America. There were earthquakes that happened in the middle of Africa. There were earthquakes that happened in the middle of Eurasian plate or in Russia. Now, how did this happen? Still being discovered. It might be, some lava movement under the center of that plate that caused the instability of the plate itself. We do not know, but there are earthquakes that happen. Now, but this earthquake is not as great as earthquakes that happen in between the 2 plates. So it might be, right, some movement under the plate itself that caused the minor quakes in the middle of the plate, or there might be a hidden, undiscovered, smaller plate inside that bigger plate. We do not know, right? And that smaller plate caused the earthquake. So geology scientists are still trying to discover more plates, right, on Earth's surface. So, a lot of wondrous things on our planet Earth itself. So therefore, the idea of Dr. Daud Salman is certainly wrong. Okay, but some scholars or some people of knowledge, some writers, some Muslims, right, tend to follow that idea, but it can be easily disproved. Now, the third idea is being proposed by this famous French surgeon who embraced Islam. His name is Maurice Bucaille. Maurice Bucaille. I do not know whether my pronunciation is right or wrong because I do not know French, but I heard that the pronunciation is like that. Maury without the C, Maury Bouquet. Or is it Bouchel? No, I think it's Bouquet. Now, according to Dr. Maury, and he is the one who wrote the book, the Bible, the Quran, and modern science. And he tried to, show that Islam is compatible, Quran is actually compatible with modern science, but Bible is is not compatible with modern science, to put it mildly. So he is quite famous. Now, according to him, the number 7 that Allah SWT mentions in Surah At-Talaq, right? Allah SWT does not mention the number 7 directly, but alludes to the word 7 there because earth is like the multiplicity of the heavens. If there are 7 heavens, so therefore, by definition or by conclusion, there might be 7 earth. So he said the number 7, as much as he said that there are more than 7 universes, because number 7 does not signify this numerical value, but it's just signify a multitude of things, so many things. It can be more than 7 universes. So therefore, similar things happen to Earth. There are more than 7 Earth in this universe. So his idea, right, actually breaks away from the idea of Dr. Daud and Dr. Zahlul. Dr. Zahlul and Dr. Daud's idea of 7 Earth is much entrenched on Earth itself. It is on Earth or inside Earth. But Dr. Maury, right, for him, no, he breaks away his idea is that there are 7 planets. No, sorry, there are planets that are similar to Earth, but there are more than 7. So this idea is very interesting, actually, right? Because we know right now that there are planets out there. If you go back 30 years ago, 1990s, the existence of planets outside solar system is just speculation. Wild speculation. Nobody in their right mind, will have that idea that planets outside solar system can be discovered. Because people back then, humans back then, 30 years ago, they do not have, we did not possess that technology to probe into deep space and analyze the flicker, the faint flicker of starlights that can, infer or tell us or inform us that there might be planets circling that star that cause a dip in the intensity of that starlight. Back then, 30 years ago, we do not have that. We do not have that technology. The first discovery of a planet outside our solar system took place or happened in 1995. And that is when, right, humans have managed to, use the Hubble telescope that was launched in late 1980s, and then refine it, use technology, further technology, and use modern mathematics, discovered new ways, new equations that they can actually infer or calculate from a small dip of light from any star, and from that dip of light, that dimming of light, scientists can actually calculate what is the object that moves across the star, right, that blocks the light, that cause the starlight to decrease in intensity a little bit by a few, less than 0.1% or even 0.01%. That's how sensitive equipments are right now. And then from that, can calculate the mass of that object and the distance of the object from that star. You see, so these are, new discoveries made by scientists. And from 1995 onwards, astronomers started to discover more and more planets outside solar system. And these planets, right, they call it as exoplanets. And people look up there, astronomers look up there. You see, look at this picture. Billions of stars. People have been wondering, way back, past history, since the dawn of human history, are there creatures that living up there? Of course, those people in the past, they said, yeah, there are creatures and they are gods. or they are demigods living up there. So that's why those people in the back then, they worship these stars. But of course, we know that stars are stars, right? But then it continues, the sense of this amazing wonder of stars. Uh, uh, how do you put it? Uh, the thirst, or the what do you call it? Words escape me right now. Um, the wonders of what these stars are, how far they are from Earth, and are there life on these stars? It keep on, piling on humans, and humans, based on this age-old question, right, keep on probing the universe and trying to discover, trying to answer that age-old question: are there lives out there? And because of this question, people started to, invent in the past, right? People invent these stories about aliens visiting Earth, and build pyramids, build all these past ancient wonders of architectures, like the Nazca lines in South American desert, Chile desert. The Nazca line is kilometers, 10 of kilometers of straight line and curve at right angle here and there. People do not know what this line represent, but if you look up, right up from the sky, you need to be in aeroplane. If you just climb up from the mountains, you cannot see. But if you go up on the aeroplanes, you can see that these lines actually represent huge murals, huge diagrams of whatever people in the past that lived there, right? The ancient Incas or the ancient Aztecs or whoever who lived there carved this line on that desert. How can they draw a very straight line for kilometers and kilometers, and then turn an angle, and then another kilometers, and they create, a beautiful picture of things that, you need to have modern equipments to build it, and it's similar in size, this and left, because it is what do you call it, uh, similar. If they draw put they put they put if they want to draw a butterfly, then the left part and the right part, they are the same length, the same shape. Okay, so people wonder whether these lines are being created by visiting aliens who are far much more advanced than us, who build all these things for us. So all this wondering, speculation, right, it builds up the tension and the excitement. And so people, started to see things out there. People started to see flying objects. And the amazing thing is that people started to see these flying objects after World War II. Before World War II, there was not there's not even a single report that people observed or people saw flying object, unidentified flying object. Never before World War II, right? But after World War II, the reports started to increase. People started to see so many things flying up there. Now that is a curiosity. Why is it so? Why suddenly there are a lot of flying objects that people started to report? Of course, you can see that is psychology, because people have started to invent, aeroplanes and much more advanced aeroplanes, jet fighters. So this actually, play to people's mind, and then a lot of movies started to be created. Hollywood started to create, movies based on science fiction stories about aliens visiting Earth, and then, have war with humans, and then, they have this Martian wars lah, whatever wars lah, all these science fiction movies, and therefore people started to being inadvertently influenced by this, and they started to see things which are not there. Because how can you assure that what you see is really out there? It may be a figment of your imagination. It might be what you want to see. Just like people want to see a ghost, Pontianak. You can see a Pontianak if you want to, because you really want to see it, and then your mind will play the trick and say, oh, this is a Pontianak. Actually, it's nothing. It's just a piece of cloth. But we say, oh, no, this is Pontianak. It's a piece of cloth. No, it's Pontianak. Because why? Because you want to see it. That's why you can see it. And so, UFOs becomes a popular culture. But strangely, again, right, the reports of these unidentified flying objects, all these reports, majority of it came from America and Europe. You can hardly find any reports that come from, let's say, Asia or India or Japan, right? All these people, or Africa. What, you mean all these UFOs come visiting, they not fly all over this place, they just fly over Europe and America? Why is it so? Why? Because these people, they are more exposed, these people in Europe, America, they are more exposed to this culture of, UFOs, visiting aliens from movies, from books, science fiction books written in English, and then they have advanced, jet fighters, and they believe in conspiracy stories, conspiracy theories, or whatever. Until now, people over there love to believe in conspiracy things. So therefore, the reports came much more from them rather than from other places. And it's quite amazing. It's quite something that is a curiosity, right? If there is actually a real UFO visiting us, then it should be cited by all people, all over the globe, not just a population of a certain country or certain continent only. But then there are also now verified reports by US Army that they saw unidentified flying objects, or they call it the identified, uh, uh, not flying, aerial objects, UAO, or something like that. They avoid using the word UFO because UFO has been used in popular culture and it carries negative connotation of aliens visiting and try to kill us. That's popular culture. So they call it unidentified aerial objects or something like that. And if you read newspapers, right, the army say that, yeah, we have verified a lot of observers from our navy pilots, jet fighter pilots and captains, this and that, right? Or this strange object that start to move here and there at very high speed that defies physical science and logic, and you can hover over the sea without any ripples on the sea itself, just like it is on anti-gravitational propulsion, whatever you want to call it, right? But the strange thing is that only US Army reported it. British Army did not report it. Russian Army did not report it. All other armies in the world did not report it. And this is something that is, strange. Why only your army reports seeing these sort of things? And not only that, your army, right, all these verified, they said verified reports about UFOs witnessed by all those pilots and this and that, they witness all these sightings only in restricted military zone where they practice flying and live firing. They didn't witness it outside. Most of the reports, majority of the reports, is confined within that military zone, not outside military zone. So there's only one or two reports of commercial pilots, right, that saw some strange objects, and that's it. But most of the reports came from military jet fighters, jet pilots. So again, a lot of question marks. So what happened? Is it your instrument? Or is it because you're being spooked by your enemy who created some sort of, an illusion to you, to test your military capability? We do not know the answer, right? Russians definitely never report about seeing these unidentified flying objects flying over their military zone. No, only in America. So something strange is happening on Earth. So still unanswerable about this thing. But again, let's go back to our discussion on planets outside there. So from 1995 onwards, astronomers have discovering a lot of planets, and these planets are called exoplanets. What are exoplanets, and how many of them? And are there exoplanets that are similar to us? Inshallah, we'll continue our discussion next week. Okay, inshallah. So let us end our session tonight, and let me see whether there is any question or not. Okay, no question. Alhamdulillah. So thank you very much. I'll meet you again next week. We end with Tasbih Kafara and Surah Al-Asr. Subhanaka wa bika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal 'asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus solihat wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.